I think making sure that you know exactly who your brand is, what your brand does, why people engage with your brand, understanding that like very, very basic stuff is invaluable. If you can't answer the question, why do people engage with my brand? Then doing all this other stuff and worrying about conversions and clicks and, you know, trying to think about, well, what's my 15-second commercial going to be? None of that is going to be successful if you don't know your brand's DNA. So, really, really do some work to define that different and better for your brand. And then everything can build on that foundation. But that is where you absolutely have to start.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited for today's conversation. I'm joined with Sara Thomas, the president of Charlton Marketing, a Portland-based agency that is known for turning media strategy into brand growth for mid-sized companies. Welcome, Sara.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing great, and you?
I'm doing great too.
Yes, yes. Can you talk a bit about yourself and Charlton Marketing and the operations of Charlton Marketing?
Yeah, sure thing. Like you said, we're based in Portland, Oregon, and we're a full-size agency. We work primarily with, I'd say, mid to, companies of all sizes, really.
Yeah.
So, I've got some folks that are, a 5, 6 person outfit, and then I've got some that have, 35, 40, 50 locations. So it kind of varies. Um, Primarily what we do is drive traffic to, um, our brick and mortar locations. So people who have like a grocery store that you need to get actual people into. So it's a little bit different than some of our digital marketing friends who are really web focused. And we provide all of the services that you need to do that. So creative, branding, messaging, and then all of the media planning and placement. So placing on,
Yeah.
everything from, um, streaming television to terrestrial radio to billboards, all of that stuff. So that's what we do all day, every day over here.
Impressive, impressive. I saw on your LinkedIn that you are the third president, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so can you tell me a story about the first time you joined the company? Yeah. I,
I started at Charlton Marketing in 2013 and as an account manager. And from there, I was working with our clients a lot, doing some copywriting, doing a lot of like client management and all that fun stuff.
yeah,
Love our clients, right? um,
exactly.
yeah. When the president was ready to retire, I kind of was just happened to be in the right place at the right time. And he asked me if I would like to buy the business, and I did. That was 2019. So the timing was a little tricky because then we had a global pandemic the very
Oh,
next year.
unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. So it really tested me and the agency. It was a tough time. So huge challenge, but we got through it.
Yeah, yeah, that is really, really great because in the time of pandemic, a lot of things went down and there was more difficulties around, like almost every company got influenced by it. So how did you deal with that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I visited the liquor store a lot.
Oh,
Ah, I mean, I just so in all seriousness, we had a couple of great folks who were in the agency who one of which is still my media director and is like has really been a support for me as we kind of navigated through that.
yeah,
Um the agency, we had to make a lot of tough decisions and it was my first year in charge and I was having to like do layoffs and right size, as we say, and
yeah,
um, take a look at the type of business we were doing. We're driving people to, trying to drive traffic to brick and mortar locations. If the grocery store is closed, if the bank is closed, you're not sending people there. So kind of had to shift to make sure we were like offering the right services. And then We downsized a lot of our internal full-time employees, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, but then as a result of that, we made a lot of great partnerships with like freelancers and other agencies and specialists in different areas that we still have right now. And that's kind of how we have the business structured now is our core team of our full-time employees internally. Um, and we really focus on managing like the strategy and a lot of the stuff that we do really well. And then if there are things that we need support for, I've got like a bunch of folks that I kind of pull from.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay, that's really impressive. So that gave you a room to really lead well in such a perilous time. That is really great. So you are always in the room with executives all the time. What's one belief about growth that brand leaders are still clinging to, but honestly, it's not helping them anymore? Because I read about a report and I saw that 60% of consumers says they want fewer marketing messages. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I don't doubt it because I like, yeah, I do marketing, but I'm also like a human being in the world. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm exposed to ads, and it's funny, when I'm with friends and they're like, "Oh my God, this ad on this stupid thing," and I'm like, "Hey,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what is putting food on my table." But at the same time, it's like, gosh, you're at the gas station, trying to fill your car, and you have to get an ad while you're standing at the pump, and you're like, literally everything we're doing, we're just getting bombarded. So it doesn't surprise me to hear people say, "Hey, I want less of this." Um, so it's tricky for us in the marketing on the marketing side of things to be like, okay, well, how do we not annoy people with our messaging, but knowing that we still need to get the message in front of folks? And I think a lot of that boils down to really making sure your message is compelling and not an abrasive one or not something that's gonna be annoying,
Yeah.
but still breaks through. Like, we used to have those, like, very, like, flashing lights and
Yeah.
very loud was better, and now it's like, how do we break through the noise but not annoy people? And then also, in the ad world, we have what's called frequency, and that's how many times you see a message. And if you don't have your media buy dialed in so that your frequency caps are in place, so say I only want to serve this message to somebody, 14 times over the course of a month or whatever. Just kind of have those two things dialed in tandem. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry to everyone. You're still gonna see tons and tons of bad messaging. I don't think that's going away.
I mean, yeah, it's gonna be really difficult for them to remove the metrics because it is one of those metrics that you use to check growth and everything. A lot of brands are also addicted to metrics like conversion, CPMs, and clicks. But that game is getting a bit less as effective and rather more expensive. So when you talk to clients about shifting toward brand and longer term plays, what gets through them and what makes it click?
I think everybody who's in a position to make a decision on the client side, whether that's like sometimes I'm talking to the founder, the person who like invented a thing or it's their business, or if it's, the marketing officer, chief marketing officer, or whomever, the way to pose it to them is around storytelling and remind them that telling a story, it's the reason we pick up a book, it's the reason we go to the movies, it's the reason we binge watch TV is to see a compelling
Yeah,
story. So if we can tell a really compelling story around a brand, we're going to motivate the consumer on the other end. And to also then tie it back to these metrics that everybody loves and everyone is addicted to, like you say, it's true. It can be really, really tempting to just look at bottom of the funnel conversions and have all of your decisions driven by that to say, I just want a person to convert tomorrow. Um, that kind of removes a lot of context, right? Because if you're
yeah,
buying, say, if I'm buying a bag of tea, whatever, I can go into the store. I maybe don't need a ton of storytelling to get me there. I see the little bear on the box and I buy the tea and I'm
yeah,
good. If I'm buying, say, a home or a car or something that is going to take a little more capital and a little more time, um, I'm gonna have a longer time to decide what kind of car or what kind of home that I wanna buy or who I want to remodel my kitchen or whatever. Um, so you have an opportunity to tell a story there. And yeah, at the end of the day, someone is gonna be at the bottom of the funnel and they're gonna convert. Um, but it wasn't like the one paid search ad that made them
Yeah.
make that decision necessarily. So it's important to think about it as a holistic thing. And when you start to talk about common sense, like think about your own behaviors, I think that breaks through a little bit.
Yeah, based on what you said, brand cannot depend on only one metric, right? So how can they balance in decision making with the results that comes from those metrics?
I think, again, just think about it as a holistic plan. If you're making a plan for any piece of your business, you're not just focused on one individual thing. You're not focused on one
Yeah.
part. You think about it like an entire being, right? And so um to just try and kind of pull back from there, and it can be really tempting to say, well, we did this one thing and this one thing worked really well this one time. Let's keep doing that over and over and over. And a lot of times, when I see that, you'll either experience diminishing returns because you're putting all of your budget into one area and you're neglecting another part of it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, our existing consumers are falling off, or we're not getting any new people because we're only focusing on existing because that's what was working in the moment. Um, I think just sometimes getting that outside perspective so that
Yeah.
you're looking at it um from a non-biased kind of point of view. And at the same time, like if something's working, yeah, continue to put budget there, but don't do it at the expense of the whole rest of your marketing plan.
All right, all right, all right. So let me get into the media for a second. Media strategy feels like a mess now across many brand companies, and there are fragmented channels, privacy walls, etc. Where are the smartest brands really showing up and getting attention? And just as important, where are they quietly pulling back and saving money?
I think kind of to speak on what you just mentioned, which was, everybody for a long time was focused at that on that bottom of the funnel on conversions. So people were throwing a ton of money at paid search and at Google and even at paid social. So like Meta was getting a big chunk of brand money because we could see like an immediate somebody would see an ad and they would click and we would think that click is really important to us, so we need to capture that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the smartest brands right now are still doing that, but strategically, and they're still focusing on their most likely to convert consumers, but the smartest ones are taking time to say, how can I tell my story in more of a long form kind of way? They're investing in some more video and like visual. As far as the media side of that, I think, streaming now has eclipsed linear television. That's not a surprise to anyone, but um, as far as viewership time. So and this year is the first year that that has happened, actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's still people watching the nightly news, but it's a lot more likely that you're gonna find them watching YouTube TV or streaming their favorite show. Some of that's gonna be ad supportive, some of that's not gonna be ad supported, but I think taking some time to think about that storytelling is where some brands are shifting to say, "Oh, this is worth it actually because I'm gonna spend some time telling the story at the top of the funnel, so when they get down to the meta ad that I have placed, they're way more likely to convert." It just makes all the rest of the pieces of your funnel so much more effective.
Okay, so that means storytelling is something that is really relevant to get your conversions right. How will it look like if you move storytelling from the whole perspective?
If you take it out completely,
Yeah. Is
don't do
there any
that.
so okay, that means it is really relevant that if you remove it, it's gonna like affect the whole thing, right?
I think so. I think so. I mean, think about it just like logically is like, if you've got something that is a commodity, so,
Yeah.
you're buying gasoline and you are making the decision just based on how much, does this gas per gallon cost? You don't necessarily need a story to tell you, you're just going to make
Okay.
that based on price alone.
Yeah.
But if you're buying, like, a set of dishware for your kitchen, which I just did, um, that's something that you're like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna use this all the time, and I want to love it," and I was, like, making an investment in it, so I went and looked at a bunch of different blogs that featured a bunch of different dishware and then kind of made that decision based on a lot of emotion. If there was no storytelling around, the brand that I chose, and they were just like, well, I only care about, somebody seeing this and price, or I'm going to hope that when someone just Googles dishware, I pop up and they're going to click and make a decision. It's foolish to think that somebody would just say, "Oh, yeah, I'm just gonna make this decision,
Yeah.
based on nothing."
Yeah.
So, that storytelling doesn't always need to be like, "Oh, we have, like, a long form, 60-second, 2-minute ad that we're
Yeah.
telling a whole big story," but sometimes there's a time and place for that, and you can do that also in, like, 15 seconds, 30 seconds. It's possible to tell a story in that time.
All right. All right. So storytelling is something that is really relevant. And what one thing about storytelling, how do you know if your story is good, and how can you attract more customers with your storytelling?
I think hiring really talented creative is the first step. So make sure, the copywriters and the art directors and everybody that you've got to help you tell that story are really talented. Um, but at the same time, you need to have information about your consumer. So don't think about it from your point of view. You have to think about everything from the consumer's point of view. And that's what really smart brands are doing. They're considering the consumer. What do they want? They're probably doing focus groups or some kind of studies or, um, you know, gathering information. They're using their zero party and their first party data to get this info. And that's how they're crafting their briefs to have their really talented creative folks put those stories together. So it's really about audience first.
Okay. Can you give me a story, a client, or a campaign where stepping from growth at any price era actually led to a win? It doesn't have to be flashy. I'm just curious that new approach really showed up in results.
Yeah, I think I've got a client that has a kind of a niche product. They're an agriculture, supply store. They've got a bunch of different, products, though, that can appeal to people who don't people who have farms are going to be able to shop there and get, like, feed for their cows, but also people who are just homeowners or gardeners can go and get paint, and they can get garden supplies, and they can get fencing or whatever. So it kind of has a broad appeal, but in order to bridge that gap and attract that audience, we really thought about it in terms of farmers who are like your stereotypical kind of farmer that you think of, and he's out there, he wakes up at, 5 a.m. and he's
Yeah.
feeding the cows, etc. How do we appeal to somebody who lives in an apartment in Portland and just wants to, like, buy some paint or buy some gardening stuff for their patio.
Yeah.
Um, so we crafted all of the storytelling around farm proven. So all of the products are used by these farmers so you can trust them. So even if you're just like a suburban dad that needs some tools, well, the like badass farmer who's out at 5 a.m. is using it, so
Yeah.
it's good enough for you who you're, like, in your garage doing whatever, you know? So that was kind of we crafted, a whole campaign around that and kind of hinged it on, showing the life on the farm, but then also how does this appeal to somebody who is, yeah, living in, like, suburban Oregon.
Oh, okay. So that being said, that was a successful campaign then.
Yes, yeah.
So how do you feel after helping a company with such successful missions?
I think a lot of the times my biggest success with that, like, obviously, we're looking at metrics like traffic and sales and all those things, but I think it's being able to get the brand decision makers on board with understanding, this is worth it, and, um sometimes there'll be really strong opinions about what we should and shouldn't do based on personal preference or,
Yeah.
like, I call it the audience of one. So if I can get a brand decision maker to let go of that audience of one thinking and consider the actual consumer, and we can have a really great brief come out of that, that's where I feel like I have done my job and I feel like we've been successful.
Oh, great. That's really great. So you've worked with a lot of franchise brands here, and is
Mhm.
there something unique about those businesses that people outside the world don't get?
Yeah, working with franchise groups is really unique. You know, they can be there's just a lot of, opinions when it comes to that because 'cause you've got the franchisee and you've got the franchisor, and a lot of times there's more than one franchisee, and they're in a group, and they're all paying into a shared marketing pool of budget, and I mean, for those folks, a lot of times my job comes down to uniting everyone to get to like a shared opinion, right? And I have to
Yeah.
do a lot of selling to be like, this is what we should do, and here's why. And you can trust me that this is going to be successful. And, you know, if you wanna talk about an audience of 1, you got an audience of 1 times 5 times 10, and
Yeah.
then you got the franchisor who is like, "Well, you have to do it my way," and they wanna fight just because they wanna fight, and yeah, so it's really interesting. It's a little bit more about massaging personalities,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
than it is sometimes than it is doing just straight up marketing.
Oh, okay. So you have to then be connected to them and know how their personality is before you can deal right with them, right?
Yes.
All right.
That's the way to put it, dealing with personalities.
That's good. Can you give our audience some last wisdom about branding in case anybody out there is struggling to put out their brand up there? Right? What advice would you give them?
I think making sure that you know exactly who your brand is, what your brand does, why people engage with your brand, understanding that like very, very basic stuff is invaluable. If you can't answer the question, why do people engage with my brand, then doing all this other stuff and worrying about conversions and clicks and, you know, trying to think about, well, what's my 15-second commercial going to be? None of that is going to be successful if you don't know your brand's DNA. So, really, really do some work to define that different and better for your brand. And then everything can build on that foundation. But that is where you absolutely have to start.
All right. So that means your brand DNA is really important and a great foundation for your brand is also really relevant to grow it. Very great insight. Thank you very much for today. So that's the end of the podcast, guys. I'll put her LinkedIn and the company's website under the description below. So in case anybody wants to reach out to Charlton Marketing, it's going to be easy for you. Thank you very much, Sarah, for today. And we will connect again.
Thanks. Thank you.